All right, welcome. In today's world, business is pretty much global, right? But what happens when a company's most important asset, its people, starts crossing borders? Well, that's where international human resource management comes into play. So let's dive into this really complex, fascinating system that manages the human side of our global economy.
Just stop and think about your day for a second. This quote really hits it on the head. The laptop you're probably watching this on, the shoes on your feet, maybe even the tea you're sipping, they're all the final result of a massive global team effort. Every single one of those items in your global shopping cart connects you to this huge network of people. We're talking about designers in Milan, engineers in Silicon Valley, factory workers in Taiwan, marketers in London. You get the picture. This whole thing isn't just about products. It's about the real people who make, move, and manage them all across the planet.
And the special discipline that has to handle all of this human complexity? Well, it has a name: International Human Resource Management, or as you'll hear it called, IHRM. It's basically the engine room of global business.
So that brings us to the big question, right? What exactly are we talking about when we say IHRM? And when we talk about this global workforce, who are the actual people, the key players, that we're managing? So IHRM is way more than just hiring and payroll. As you can see from the definition, it's about doing all the normal HR stuff, plus handling all the complicated things like work permits, visas, and even cross-cultural training. Seriously, think of it as HR with a passport and a really, really deep understanding of how the world works.
Okay, so to get a handle on managing a global workforce, IHRM usually breaks it down into three key categories of employees. And trust me, understanding these three groups is absolutely fundamental to this whole field.
And here they are. These are the three main classifications you're going to hear all the time: parent country nationals, or PCNs, host country nationals, or HCNs, and third country nationals, or TCNs. These acronyms, they're pretty much the language of international HR.
Let's break that down. Imagine a US-based company, say IBM, opens a new office in the UK. If they send an American manager over to run that office, that manager is a parent country national, a PCN. Now, the British employees they hire to work in that UK office, those are the host country nationals, or HCNs. Simple enough, right? But wait, it gets a little more interesting. What if that US company in the UK decides to hire a manager from their Paris office, a French citizen, to come work there? That person is a third country national, a TCN. And really, any of these employees on a foreign assignment, so the PCNs and the TCNs, they all fall under this broad umbrella term, expatriate.
Okay, so now that we know who the players are, let's tackle a huge misconception. A lot of people think IHRM is just regular domestic HR, but, scaled up. As we're about to see, it's a completely different ballgame.
So let's just ask it straight up. Is managing people across different countries and cultures really any different from managing them all in one country? The answer is 1,000% yes.
In fact, the experts have actually identified 6 specific factors that make international HR just so much more complex than the domestic version.
And here they are. First, IHRM just involves way more activities, like taxes and relocation. It demands a broader perspective to be fair to everyone from different countries. It gets way more involved in employees' personal lives, helping with things like housing and family stuff. You're managing a much more complex mix of employees, locals, and expats. The risks are just higher. A failed assignment can cost a fortune. And finally, it's constantly dealing with a ton of external influences, like foreign governments and local cultures. Let's zoom in on a couple of these. First off, there's just so much more to do. Your average domestic HR team isn't worrying about international tax law, or trying to coordinate moving services across 3 continents, or making sure an employee's kids can get into a good school in a new country. IHRM does all of that, and then some.
This quote here perfectly illustrates that 5th factor we mentioned: higher risk. A mistake in domestic HR, yeah, it can be costly, but a mistake in IHRM, like sending the wrong person on an international assignment, that can sink a multi-million-dollar expansion into a new market. The stakes are incredibly high, which is why getting IHRM right is so critical for any global company. And finally, just think about all the external stuff. Domestic HR operates under one government, one set of labor laws, and a pretty consistent national culture. IHRM, well, it has to be an expert in the laws, the politics, the economic conditions, and the cultural norms of every single country it operates in. It's this constant, incredibly complex balancing act.
So, if IHRM is this complex, why are more and more companies jumping into the deep end? Well, that brings us to the powerful global forces that are really driving this whole trend.
Really, it comes down to a few major drivers pushing everyone forward. Technology, for one, is making the world feel a lot smaller. Business alliances like mergers and acquisitions are happening all the time. Companies are pushing hard into new, high-growth emerging markets. And honestly, our cultures are becoming more globalized, meaning people want international products and services everywhere.
When you put all those forces together, they've created this new kind of global economy. It's not just connected, it's completely interdependent. And in this kind of environment, you simply cannot win without a world-class global team. And you can't have one of those without mastering IHRM.
So here's the most important takeaway. International human resource management isn't what it used to be. It is no longer just some back-office administrative function. Today, it is a core strategic pillar that sits at the table, helping to decide and execute a company's entire global strategy. It's a huge factor in success or failure.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. As technology keeps blurring borders and more of us are working in virtual teams spread all across the globe, the challenges and the importance of IHRM are only going to get bigger. So the real question isn't whether companies need it, but how is this field going to evolve to meet the needs of a truly borderless workplace?